Hello, and welcome to another edition of Eddie G's Music World. It is December 11th, 2018. It's the first solo show in about 3 weeks. I have been happy to share the mic with two times the Grigster and one time Creeple Freak, great YouTube radio personalities that have a lot of talent and a lot of things to share. And sometimes it's okay to get away from the standard Eddie G's Music World content, which is mainly music related only. But it's all right to hear other people's input, their take, comedy talk about Creeple Freak, Grigster's exploits in his opinions and his radio exploits as well. All welcome, and then I do welcome other people. There's one or two others here and there that have said they might do it one day, but they don't know. And I have made a great effort to reach 5 or 6 like current bands that are not massive bands, because obviously if they're the Rolling Stones, I think they could, they're not going to be looking at me to promote them. But lesser known, like, I was happy that Helix actually thought about it. They didn't accept it, but they sort of replied to me 2 different times, which I know it's not really like a 3-pointer to win the NBA championship to say that, but way lesser bands than Helix were ignored me. I mean, people that could fill a club maybe with 15 or 30 people didn't reply to me. So we're talking about guys who travel around in a car, probably with their instruments in the trunk. I don't mention the names because they were pretty. Also Sloan. Sloan actually has a pretty good following, and I once talked to their manager because I asked them. I had heard that the band Sloan had done the song for the then electronics store called Future Shop, and he replied that they got a check every year, and it was a bit of an income stream, but because one of the Sloan songs was used in a Future Shop ad. But of course Future Shop closed down. They were I think it was owned by the Best Buy company anyway. It was like they were competing with each other, so it didn't make sense to keep going. And at the time, the manager replied to me and told me a bit of a story. So then I saw Sloan was coming to Montreal, like within a week, and I asked would they want to be interviewed, and they didn't reply. So, they're not exactly getting bigger, Sloan. I mean, they were big, somewhat big in the 90s, and now it's 2018. They could have used, although I'm not exactly going to fill the auditorium with people, it didn't cost them anything to talk to me, but they didn't want to. It's okay. I'm not really mad about the whole thing. It would have been fun, and there'll be other opportunities. There'll be other attempts to get people on the show. If you're some buddy in the entertainment or want to be in their entertainment and you want to talk, it doesn't have to be an interview format where I ask questions and you answer, or you ask questions and I answer. It could be a loose show like it's been with the Grigster, where we just talk, and Creeple Freak was fun too. He just kind of like threw in a few interesting comments and things, and we had a nice hour-long chat. And that kind of thing works for me as well. Or I can do solo shows. This is a hobby. One day, if it ever becomes bigger, I'll be thrilled to say that it went further, and take it from there. Okay, the main thing I was going to bring up was a little bit of a story I heard. I mean, everybody nowadays is touring, so we all know that that's the scenario right now. So I saw that Nick Mason was touring. Of course, he is the original drummer of the band Pink Floyd. So I said to myself, you know what? I'm really not going to shows that much anymore. We already went over my Iron Maiden issue where, I didn't go to that show because the fact that, it was very hard to get the tickets, and I am going to Kiss. But, you know, Nick Mason's coming, and I just said to myself, I really doubt if I will go. But because there was I'm guessing that the tickets are not selling that great. So Nick Mason felt he had to promote the shows a little better, because, you know, he's doing Saucer Full of Secrets and other music from the early Pink Floyd days, like Syd Barrett era type of stuff. So out of the blue, you know, I don't remember if I looked into how many tickets were sold, but I didn't really give it a lot of thought that he's coming, because he's a drummer, and he's, you know, talented guy, and he's an original member of the band, so he's not like a nobody. But at the same time, you're going to hear the drummer, and he's going to surround himself with a bunch of people that are going to sing like the members of Pink Floyd, and play guitar like the members, and play keyboards like the members that are either the keyboardist who's died, Richard Wright, I believe, or, you know, let's face it, the bass player and the guitarist, they're not going to be there most likely. So what he threw out to the public was, oh, there's a chance that there'll be a Pink Floyd guy other than me at some of my concerts, because he's obviously trying to boost up his sales. So I don't blame the guy. Sure, he wants to get more people to come to his concerts. Sure. And then he said something like, well, it's not going to happen that they'll both be there, referring to Gilmour and Waters. He says they're a couple of older gentlemen that don't like each other, but they like talking to me, so they basically communicate with me, but not to each other. Obviously, there's a lot of financials that have been worked out, because Gilmour co-wrote stuff, and Rogers wrote most of it, and Gilmour wrote some. So there's a lot of money every time Roger Waters does a show. Chances are a little money goes to, well, he doesn't call himself Pink Floyd, so he doesn't have to pay them for the name, because Roger Waters is not allowed to call himself Pink Floyd. You can't put a band together and say Pink Floyd, because Gilmour and maybe Mason own the name, but at least Gilmour does. So that issue's probably been worked out, but they won't for sure. They will not ever show up at a Nick Mason concert together, and they're the only other two quote unquote originals. Gilmour's not, because he showed up in 1968 after. Actually, he played at the same time as Syd Barrett, but then eventually Syd Barrett, with his mental health issues, drifted off, and, well, we all know the story. Mental hospital, you know, was not part of the band anymore. But the story is that Roger Waters has said main reason that he's not crazy about working with Gilmour is that he thinks he's the greatest part of Pink Floyd, meaning Roger Waters thinks he's the greatest because he wrote most of it, or he says he's the writer, but not for everything, but for the most part he was. But there were a few other songs that other members threw their writing contribution in to the record. So he's not the only writer, but he was the main writer. So he felt he was higher up and more important than the rest of the band. And when he left in 1985, either he left on his own, or there was arguments, or doesn't really matter. He was not thrilled that he couldn't keep the name Pink Floyd, and the fact that Pink Floyd produced a few albums, had success, not to the degree of Pink Floyd did with The Wall, but they still had some albums that came out that sold relatively well, and did some tours. They did arena tours for sure, maybe even stadiums, without Roger Waters. So he might have been saying, the story is that he was not happy that the success for Pink Floyd still managed to continue for a while. And it's not ever failed technically, because they're a dormant band. They're not a band that's trying to do anything currently. I mean, the first thing I've ever heard in years is this Nick Mason venture. Maybe he doesn't have as much money as the other guys, I don't know. Or maybe he just wants to get out there and play. But they've never really bombed. They've never really had a period where they just stopped being popular because they haven't come out with anything in 15 years or so. And they don't tour anymore without Waters or in any form. So, but there was a good chunk of time from between 85 and let's say the late 90s, early 2000s that Pink Floyd was running around and doing shows, coming up with a few albums, but they don't seem to want to right now, and they are getting old. So, you know, if you don't want to do it when you're 72 or 3, you're not going to want to do it when you're 82 or 83 if you live that long. So this is it. But will I go to a Nick Mason show for the chance that Waters or Gilmour would pop in? Not likely, because who knows if they're going to bother coming to my town. And as much as I think Nick Mason is a very good drummer, I'm not going into the bitter cold to some medium-sized theater to hear him drum and some 3 or 4 other guys on the chance that maybe another Floydy will show up. With my bad luck, if it happens to be bad luck, one of those 2 guys will show up, and I'll have blown the chance to see a partial reunion of Pink Floyd. I have seen Pink Floyd once in the Olympic Stadium in 1977, where I missed about half the show, but I got in for free because me and my friend, we saw a bunch of people smashing a door in, and we got into the stadium and we were high up. It was overflowing with people, so we did hear a good 8, 9, 10 songs from Pink Floyd live. And then I've seen Roger Waters twice, but he's very expensive, and it's like $300-400 a seat if you want a decent seat. And I'm not running out. I mean, I saw him do Dark Side of the Moon. I saw him do The Wall. Then he came back a couple more times, and I just stopped after the first 2 times because I'm not questioning how great he is. It's just that I don't feel like slapping down $400 or $500 every time the guy comes to town. It gets expensive. So that's my Pink Floyd update. It's kind of interesting, and although I put at the heading of my show that it was the top 100 guitarists, I have already completed that list, and it's not really going to make anyone that upset when they click on it and they hear that I'm actually doing the top 500 albums. So we'll leave the heading to be misleading. It's really not going to make anybody that upset. Okay, so it's Eddie G's Music World for December 11th, 2018, and we are going to pick up where I left off a few weeks back with the top 500 albums. And from my records that I keep, we were at number 370. The act is Mott the Hoople, and the album is Mott. Famously, this is a band that was kind of like never a massive band. The only major airplay they got was All the Young Dudes, written by, I think, Bowie, or maybe some of the other Mott the Hoople people contributed. I don't remember. But Ian Hunter was the singer. I did see Ian Hunter live. He performed with Ringo Starr's All-Star Band. He's a great guitarist, a singer. But it wasn't a David Bowie band. He didn't make the band. They existed, and he threw in, he obviously helped them out with writing a song that was a popular song. But this was their only, major success, if you can call it major. I think Mick Ralphs was in it. Or am I confusing myself? I think it was him, the guy from Bad Company, the guitarist, I think was in this band too. Could be looked up, and if I'm wrong, the comment section is waiting for you to correct me. And but from my recollection, he was in this band. I did buy the album a few years later. There was another good song called Death May Be Your Santa Claus. I liked it. I mean, they had talent. But a lot of these bands, they're not meant for the long haul. Okay, back to the next album on the list of the top 500 albums according to Rolling Stone, not me, is number 369, and it is by the band The Smiths, and it's Louder Than Bombs. Now, this is a band where I knew 3 or 4 of the Smiths songs, not to the point where I'm aficionado of the band, but obviously Morrissey was in this band, Johnny Marr was in this band. They seem to acquire a pretty good cult following in the Uh, in the alternative world, kind of a less successful Cure band. So they've been around. I mean, Morrissey obviously very controversial. He's a vegetarian. He gets mad at people serving meat at his concerts, etc. And Johnny Marr, I'm sure he either came here recently or he's about to, because I remember seeing that his name was on a list of acts coming to Montreal. But I don't know a lot of their songs, so I know a little bit more Morrissey songs than I did the Smiths, but it's easy to see why I might confuse the two, since Morrissey was in the Smiths, and I'm not sure if those two guys even talk to each other anymore. Chances are they don't. I think I heard that they pretty much, broke up and they both went on their own little ways. Number 368, one of the most overplayed bands of all time, the Eagles album, The Eagles. I remember seeing, I think it was the movie The Big Lebowski, and Jeff Bridges' character is the Big Lebowski, and he either gets picked up by a car or he's hitchhiking or something, and somebody puts in an 8-track or a cassette of the Eagles, and so Jeff Bridges' character says, "No, not the Eagles, man. Please don't torture me. Anything but the Eagles." And let's face it, I think it's a two-way tie between the Eagles and the Beatles of the most overplayed band of all time. I've seen them twice. There's nothing bad to say about the Eagles. They're still working out. They're still touring with the son of the guy that died, Glenn Frey's son. Maybe it's good. I've heard good things about it, but I saw them twice, and I'm not going to say I don't like any of their music, but it's just, you really want to hear "Take It Easy" again, or "Peaceful Easy Feeling"? Their greatest hits, I think, is the first or the second biggest selling album of all time in the United States. It might have outsold Thriller. I mean, it's just our greatest hits. They throw songs from different albums on an album. Is that so brilliant? But it sold like 30-something million copies, and or maybe more. Something to look up. Okay, next, number 367, Madonna, "Ray of Light." I liked the album when it came out. I'm a bit hard on her, just because she's like she's died down as far as her popularity goes over the time, because her new albums don't sell anymore. But maybe she's just a bit like the Eagles, in that there's just too much saturation that I remember. Couldn't get away from her songs for 20 years straight. Now at least she's died down, and she's no longer going to freak people out with new records, which is the case for most people. But the song "Ray of Light" was pretty well done. It had a good video, and maybe it was like wasn't the end of her album's success. It was still another 7-8 years left of having albums that sold. I think she dabbled in writing, so if she really did write it, then good for her. She's got more range than just being a girl that's known to be controversial. Well, she was before she turned 60. It's hard to be a controversial figure when you're already over 60. Nobody's sitting there looking for her to wear a tight dress and looking sexual, and you're, she's not a grandmother yet, but she could be pretty soon. And, she still will, if she comes to town, within 20-30 minutes, she'll still sell out the arena where I live. So she's managed, no matter what you could say about her, she's never managed to drop the touring popularity. She just keeps getting, she still can sustain that. She could do a residency in Vegas for years and years and sell it out every night. So she went from a girl from Michigan, penniless, if you believe the stories, and worked her way up. Not too many can say that. Number 366, Johnny Cash, "American Recordings." Okay. This is the one with an acoustic set produced by Rick Rubin. So obviously it's the one where he was dying, or getting close, getting sick. Mid-90s. I don't know if he was sick yet, but obviously by 2000. He was 2002, 3. He was getting cancer at that point. So I'm not sure if this was preceding his cancer time that he had. But Rick Rubin was one of these young producers that had a lot of popularity, and so teaming up with Rick Rubin was a good move for him. It modernized his style and got him a bigger audience. But as far as that goes, I mean, I don't know the music all that well that's on here. I know he had that song "Hurt," but that was later on in his time frame. Maybe that was like late mid 2003 or 4. Okay. 365 is the next position on the Rolling Stones top 500. Rage Against the Machine, Rage Against the Machine. I mean, people freak out over this. This guy, Eddie Trunk, he's buddies with this guy. Not the singer, Tom Morello. Talks about him like he's like his best friend. They hang out, they go to bowl together, they go to dinner together. I think I saw the drummer play drums for Black Sabbath. I remember hearing that on the last Black Sabbath tour that I saw 4 years ago, they used that drummer. I don't know. I like this band, but I've never said to myself when I hear that they're coming to town, when they used to be, I think they're kind of on hiatus or broken up. I don't know. Never said to myself, wow, I've got to see this band. I mean, it's just a band. They're just one of many bands that I've never been blown away by them. I like the kind of vocal style. It sounds like one of these panicky protest type of singer guys, Zach De La Rocha. It's always like hyper tense delivery of his songs, and I like a couple of songs, but I'm not blown away, and I wouldn't go see them. But they're up for being inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and Eddie Trunk has said he is definitely voting for Rage Against the Machine, since he is pals with the guitarist. Makes sense. Maybe he loves the music. I'm not saying it's lousy. It is good music, but it's just never been anything that made me, get all thrilled to hear them. I liked them a little here and there. What's number 364 on the list? The Doors' L.A. Woman. Wow, it's a standardly amazing album. Also overplayed. The Doors had a renaissance in the 80s after the guy died. I mean, I interviewed the guy who wrote the book about the Doors when I was 20 years old in 1980. I tracked the guy down, and that was like the beginning of my the radio interview of rock stars career of mine. It was the beginning, and there is no end. I'm still doing those type of things. At least I'm thinking about it and trying to. Jim Morrison. It was that period of time where he was like getting heavy. Stories up around that he was like rolling around in the studio, and it was, of course, this mystic figure that never lost his shine, because he was always this, there were always these stories about how he was this guru type of guy and brilliance and everything. But I did like the Doors, so I'm not about to say anything negative about them. And this album, I liked the song "L.A. Woman." That was amazingly sounded pretty much off the cuff type of delivery. It was like didn't sound like the music was probably, I'm guessing, all done, and Jim just sang over it at the end. Like, he didn't sing and then they did the music. It was like as I can see him doing it, I don't know, they probably just worked on it a bit, but it sounds almost like improvised lyrics the way he sang. It's very primitive and very relaxed. Just the delivery. He did his thing. They mixed it all together. And that was the last album that Morrison recorded. There were other good songs on there, but L.A. Woman was the long 8-minute or so song that I think stood out, and others too. But that's the thing with the Doors. A song like L.A. Woman could never be a hit, because how are you going to take that crazy delivery and screaming and cut it down to be presentable to the masses, to the mainstream? It's too freaked out. At the time, if it, obviously they had songs that commercially appealed to the public, but that type of song was too raucous. And it's like people say to me, this wasn't a hit, that wasn't a hit. Well, how can you make it sound like LA Woman a hit? It's just too freaky weird. Number 363, a band called New Order. Another fringy band that got massively huge appeal without really being a mainstream band in America. I never looked into how far they went in England. They kind of had dance disco stuff, but also alternative mixed together. Where I live, it's a big dance city, and you would hear their songs like Bizarre Love Triangle, Blue Monday in clubs constantly. There was probably much, much more to this band than I aware of, because I never delved deep into their catalog. So, but I know those two songs, and I'm sure a couple more. There was some story that another band changed into this band, or they changed into another band, or a guy from this band went into another band. It's not really that important. I doubt if they're together. They probably just had people splinter off and go their own way. And was Yazoo, the guy from Yazoo, there was a guy from Yazoo who was in Depeche Mode. Was he in this band too? I don't really know. But there was definitely somebody came out of this band that ended up doing something else with another band and continued his career. Maybe there were two guys who did that. I don't know. Let's get to number 362. But I do like the two songs that I mentioned, Blue Monday and Bizarre Love Triangle. Number 362, should I guess? Why not guess? Who haven't we heard from that will be all over this list? Maybe they'll throw in a Beatles album. They have like 15 albums, the Beatles, or 12, so chances are they're going to end up on this list. Smashing Pumpkins. I couldn't be more wrong. Siamese Dream. Here's a guy who had a massive career, kind of had a splinter situation with the two. There was this girl and this Asian guy left, and then they had other guys and people in the band, toured with those people. Then the Asian guy came back. They did a pretty good tour with the new guy, and the other woman that was with him originally, they couldn't work out their deal. They probably were offering her not as much as she wanted, or maybe she was being difficult. So they had a kind of semi-reunion. And for whatever reason, this guy loves going on Howard Stern, Billy Corgan. It's not that I don't find him interesting. It's just that 2 or 3 times in like 2 years is a little more Billy Corgan information that I need. I know he hangs with Marilyn Manson a little bit. They might have had like an issue in the past, and then they made up. But I did like this band pretty much, and kind of thought about seeing them when they came to town with the semi-reunion. It passed through my head, but again, I'm at the stage where I'm just not going to concerts as much as I used to, so I let it kind of go. I think it was like August, September, somewhere in that time frame. But they did have a good bunch of alternative music, and for sure warrant consideration for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Are they in? I'm trying to even think. They might be in it by now. I don't know. But they had definitely produced some good music, and Corgan has this pent-up angst that he's always, whenever he sings, he's got that falsetto, wimpy voice, and then he switches to the screechy, angry man. This is kind of like a Nirvana thing. They both kind of had the same approach, where you hear Kurt Cobain squawk, and then you'd hear him have this mellow thing. But I guess that's standard. I mean, pretty much heavy metal bands do it too. Axl Rose will do the screaming angry guy type of vocal, and then he'll do the Patience vocal, a little mellow. Number 361. I don't know this. There was this thing about this street cred for this Outkast band. Other than the song "Hey Now" and "Miss Jackson," I never really gave them a hell of a lot of thought. I know they had some movie out that the two of them did. I can't remember if it was a success or not. It was kind of like a throwback type of movie where they played people in the 1920s or something. I don't know. Didn't give it a lot of thought. maybe there's more to them than I remember. They had a couple of good songs, but they got played a lot, and I just didn't care anymore about them after those two songs. They have a type, they call themselves slumadelic music. Okay, that's their name for it. And I'm pretty sure that these guys have gone on to bigger and better things since these albums came out in 2000, like this one. And Big Boy and Andre 2000 or whatever his name is, I don't know. So one of them has done this and the other one's done that. Doesn't matter. Wow, here's a guy who just passed away this week. And here he shows up on this list. Number 360 is a band called The Buzzcocks. Singles Going Steady. And Pete Shelley was the lead singer. He was 63 years old. He just died. Well, I think it was last week. Yeah, late last week. And because he died, I figured I would check out to see if I recognized any of his songs. So I clicked on 2 or 3 of them. And no, it didn't seem to register as a memory of, there wasn't, the 2 or 3 I heard, I didn't know. But I knew who they were. They were a British band, punkish band, and a lot of critical acclaim. And again, it's another case of not crossing into the pop mainstream, especially in North America. And compared to the Ramones, who also never crossed over and made it huge until they all died, and then you see them in movies and commercials constantly. There's a song, Everybody's Happy Nowadays, that they had. I don't know if those are one of the songs I clicked on or not. But what do I have to say? The little piece I heard of this band seemed to have a lot of the angst and like punky stress that we've come to know over the years. And I guess it's a big deal because a couple of people were tweeting about it. I saw that the guy died, Pete Shelley of the Buzzcocks. So it's timely that I should fall onto his album on this list of Eddie G's Music World, counting down the top 500 albums, even though it says guitarists, top 100 guitarists in the description. I don't want to start changing it because with my luck, I'll end up erasing something and I'll erase the whole show by changing the title of the show. So no big deal. Number 359, what will it be? Let's take a shot at REM. Why do I think it's REM? I have no clue. It just came to me. Elton John, Honky Chateau. Can't get any further than REM than Elton John. Okay, Honky Chateau, early 70s. Was there anything about this album that I can... Honky Cat. Okay, yeah, good song. It seems to have been his kind of like bluesy style that was on this album. He's doing his retirement tour, the 3-year tour. Hope he survives the 3 years. I didn't go see him. He was here in October. And who knows if my situation is calm, meaning financially, and I have time and he shows up again here. Could be worth seeing a third time. I have heard that it was a great show and he still can sing well based on what the person told me. But I don't know if he's coming back, and if he doesn't, I have seen him twice, so there is no major sense of sadness if I don't see him a third time. He's never come to see me, so if I don't go to see him, it's not going to make a big difference. Number 358, I glimpsed at it, so I can't guess. Miles Davis, Sketches of Pain. The only thing I can say about Miles Davis is the fact that I read a Clive Davis book, autobiography, and he says Miles Davis, who was on the label, was constantly trying to get advances from the record company, and his records were selling less and less, and they had to cut him off at some point, meaning, if he worked on an album, he would say, give me an advance, give me 25, 35, whatever, $1,000 in anticipation of the sales being great. You pay the guy a little of the money before the sales come in, and then you just don't pay him that amount when the tally is done. But they said, Clive Davis said in his book, who's an executive who was running Arista Records, Columbia at the time also, saying that this guy was like not paying off, meaning if you throw him the money, you can't recoup it easily. And his music was like, as much as everybody, Harold is trumpeting, and he was a great guitar, jazz musician. And, he was supposedly a very nasty kind of guy, and not that friendly, and, not easy to work with. So at some point, probably that relationship ended. I mean, you can't advance a guy for every album if they stop selling, of course. And Miles Davis has passed away anyway. So not a lot to contribute in the discussion of Miles Davis, because it's a jazz-related album, and I don't know much about him, except I have heard his trumpet playing, which was pretty impressive. 357. I did not look in advance. Who haven't we heard from that maybe this Rolling Stones loves, and we'll throw them. Let's say the Doobie Brothers. I have not peeked. Rolling Stones. Why didn't I go for the Rolling Stones? Massive band. If I would have just said it, people would be impressed. Between the Buttons. Andrew Holdham called it a very English album. Music called Piano. Ruby Tuesday was on this. I just saw them perform Ruby Tuesday on the Ed Sullivan Show, and I can say that it was not lip-synced. You could see that it was not the same as the studio version. So they winged it. They had, I'm pretty sure it was Keith on the piano. Mick, of course, although he plays guitar, doesn't play guitar much in the band. He was just holding the mic, but singing great. Other songs, She Smiled Sweetly. I don't know that one. Miss Amanda Jones, another song, don't know that one. I just had an argument with a guy who was criticizing the Rolling Stones, how they're starting to lose their popularity because he didn't recognize the name of the stadiums that they were performing in. Tried to explain to him, bands playing stadiums, they're doing it because they're still popular. It doesn't matter if you know the names or you don't. But this quote-unquote friend, or not really a friend now, has a habit of looking for ways to incite arguments with me. But in the last 3-4 weeks, I have stopped talking to that person, because all they do is say stupid things like that. Like, oh, I never heard of Soldier Field. Ooh, that's a obscure stadium. They must be losing it. In the history of modern music, I can almost guarantee you that the Rolling Stones have done better business in stadiums than any other band in history. Led Zeppelin didn't last long enough. Beatles toured for 3 or 4 years. ACDC, maybe they've had a good stadium run, but I doubt if they've sold as many tickets as the Stones in stadiums. So, I mean, I'm running out of people to compare them to. Most bands are arena bands, and stadium type of bands. Okay, maybe One Direction, but they've only been popular for 2 or 3 years, and I don't even know if they're still as big. So I've never looked into it, but I can't imagine a band selling more touring tickets, stadium or arena, than the Rolling Stones. They've been around since 1964, 65, 63 maybe, and they've been at a massive level, even though they don't have hits anymore, but then nobody else does either, pretty much. And they still can manage a stadium tour when they're in their mid-70s. I mean, nobody is doing that. There's no band doing that today. None. Even AC/DC, if they can be considered a contender in that department, they're probably second, just because they're having massive band member changes. The rumor is that Brian Johnson is coming back. He's been seen with them lately, and the drummer they kicked out, Phil Rudd, for getting into attempted murder charges and whatever else crazy stuff that he did. He was kicked out, and it looks they might be back. So if those two come back, they could easily do another stadium tour. Maybe if you're thinking of making a competition between the Rolling Stones and AC/DC, maybe AC/DC could be considered a contender in that list. But who else has been touring since 1964 to 2018? I can't think of anybody that dates back to the year of Beatlemania. that still tours. I mean, if I had 0.5% of the money that these guys had, I would be sitting in my house doing nothing. And I'm pretty much doing nothing with not even 0.5%. I'm probably at 0.1% of what they have. So these guys don't need money. They'd already have the fame. I can't figure it out why they keep doing the stadium tours. But the fact that they still do it, and anybody criticizes the fact that they don't think that the stadiums are big enough for them to acknowledge because they don't know the names of the stadiums, and that means that the Stones are slipping as far as popularity goes, shows how stupid some people are. Stupid. Another example of stupidity, an argument I had, the same idiot told me that if thousands of people streamed into an area where there was Paul McCartney over there and George Harrison over there, thousands would go to Paul McCartney, and then at first he said 2 people would go to George Harrison. Then he upped it to 50. And then I argued with him that thousands wouldn't go to McCartney and 2 or 50 to George Harrison. Maybe I'll give it the truth. Paul McCartney for sure was more popular than George Harrison. But when people tell me stupid things like that, I mean, if I'm going to guess, and I certainly can't measure it because I check Beatlemania footage, I can't sit there and count the screaming people and see who goes to which rock star. But if I were to say a somewhat educated guess, which I don't think I'm a stupid guy, I've been around music and thinking and learning and reading about it for many years, I would say it would be 65. 35 would not be outrageously. Of course, Paul and John outweighed the popularity to George in Beatlemania. But to say that 90-something% went to 1 or 2 guys and 1% went to the other guys is stupid, or even less than 1%. I would say it would be 65-35 to Paul versus George, because, yeah, he was twice as popular. He wasn't hundreds of times and thousands of times more popular. But this is why my life is short, and this is the second straight friend that has made an effort to constantly make stupid comments about music that I have to disprove, or just let the person win the discussion by saying moronic comments that he thinks are accurate and just going along with the person. Like if you were next to somebody and it was raining on both of you, and one guy said, no, it's not raining, what would you say? Would you agree with the guy? Or would you say, well, it actually is raining, if you don't mind? That's the choice I have to make when I'm dealing with people who are not stupid, because the guy's not stupid, who just say argumentative things that can't be proven, that are not likely to be true, and just keep throwing out theories. There's only 2 that I mentioned, and I've had enough of the discussion, so there won't be 3. But I'm just saying, people just look for fights with me. Music fights is an issue that I have. I don't like them because it makes me go doing research to prove them wrong. And if I can't find the proof, then I have to kind of get into a huff or just walk away. And those days are over, because I don't want to go back to being with people that are going to say stupid things. Okay, enough of the rant. We're at 16 minutes away from the end of Eddie G's Music World, where I've already thanked Grigster and Creep a Freak, talked about Pink Floyd, talked about most popular albums, and talked about people who argue with me. So this has been a really great variety of a show. Number 356, Randy Newman, 12 songs. Okay, this was pre-short, people. So this was before he had his minor, his medium-sized hit. And this is a guy that's is known for 2 things in my mind. A couple of hits, I Love LA and Short People, and movie soundtracks. But there's more to this guy than I know, because I don't study the guy. Randy Newman. Let's see if I can discern any information of any great interest. Rycruiter was part of this album. Kind of some of the Birds were part of this record. Mama Told Me Not to Come was on this. I'm wondering if he wrote it. It sounds like you would think he could have written it if it's on there, but I don't know. But this probably went virtually, I don't know, I wouldn't say unnoticed, but I mean, it was for the diehard fan of Randy Newman. He probably had a big following before Short People or I Love LA or before all the the movie soundtracks. Here I have another anecdote. I just remembered this fight. This is not the friend I just stopped being friends with. This is the one before that argues with me all the time. I had a 20-minute argument whether or not Randy Newman was tall or not with the first guy that I was friends with. He said he's not that tall. He's 5'9". And I had to sit there and figure out. I said, no, he's more like 6'1". So these are the kind of stupid discussions that I used to waste my time with people on the telephone. So what did I do? I had to, of course, go stick my nose into Google, try to track down wherever I could, however I could, some kind of proof of the fucking guy's height, just to satisfy this idiot that kept insisting. I didn't say he wasn't short. This idiot just said, he's not very tall. He's just not tall. He's not tall. Then I had to go dig up. I found that he was 6'1" or 6 foot. And then it was whether or not that was considered tall or not. That was the next discussion. And you wonder why I have high blood pressure. I'm taking pills because I associate myself with people who are idiots. So, of course, I think we managed to come to some kind of compromise with this argument about the height of Randy Newman. I think now that I've knocked two of these guys out, I still have aggravation, stress that's going to come no matter what. I have health issues. I have kids that fight and argue with me. There's other people too in my family, but I can't mention the names in case they listen one day. But I'm talking in the house type of people. But, I'm trying my best to reduce the stress. Trying to reduce, meaning if you walk down a street and there's always a blockage on the street, wouldn't you back your car up and go somewhere else? That's what I'm trying to do. But unfortunately, getting older, health issues, kids that are demanding and scream and fight, other people, there's always some stress. There's always somebody who's going to piss you off. There's always somebody that's going to get in your way and say stupid things that you're not going to like. I'm not saying you don't have a right to argue with me. If you like Trump and I don't, it's a reasonable argument. I've had about 20 of those on Twitter. So, but they're not my friends. You're just some bonehead on Twitter like me saying you love Trump. Okay, so you love Trump and I don't. Probably after 20 tweets, or 15 tweets between me and the person, I'll just drift off into the sunset. They don't have my phone number. They don't have my email. And if it gets really nasty, which has happened 2 or 3 times, I'll block the person because they start calling me names. I mean, I had one guy start calling me names and quoting Justin Trudeau activity and saying how idiotic Trudeau is because I said the same thing about Trump, and eventually if you get to the point where it's nonstop shots at each other, you got to back away from that too. Okay, boy, the show's going off the rails. Well, I call myself the non sequitur for a reason. I just drift off into the sunset and hope to get back on track. So we're getting back on track. Still on Eddie G's Music World Top 500 albums. Number 355. I have not seen the name. I've been wrong every time. I came close to seeing the Rolling Stones. Meaning I said Doobie Brothers. Randy Newman, obviously, who would have thought of him? Led Zeppelin has about 7 albums. Let's go with them. The Yardbirds. I'm not far because a member of the Yardbirds ended up in Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page. So you know what? Without looking at number 355 on the list, I came very close to getting the artist correct. I got 25% of the Led Zeppelin band correct. Although, was he on this album? Having a Rave Up at the Yardbirds, 1965. When did Jimmy Page join the Yardbirds? Was he an original? I think this is after Clapton left, so you can see, I'm pretty sure it was Page was on it. But even so, he was in the Yardbirds, and I said Led Zeppelin, so that's pretty close. This was after Clapton left, the bluesy style and all the issues that he had with the band. I'm not seeing a lot of details about what was on the record. We know Over Under, Sideways Down, and A Heart Full of Soul as 2 or 3 of the Yardbirds music. And they had about 5 or 6. But I love this band, and they have a picture of these guys on the record cover. And you know what? Jimmy Page had short hair then. And there's a good 3 guys. One guy's holding a bass, so that's not Page. And the other 2 holding guitars, but they're not close-ups, and I don't want to click on it to get closer. So I don't know if Page was on this album or not. It doesn't really matter. But one way or another, Page was in the Yardbirds. He went on to be a part. He was an original Zeppelin guy, and we know all of those stories. There's no point in going over the Zeppelin Yardbirds situation. Let's see. That was the closest I've come to getting it right. I'm pretty impressed. Number 354. I have not looked yet. Let's see. We haven't heard much from the Kinks, or maybe 1 or 2. Let's try for the Kinks. Billy Joel, 52nd Street. To hell. Okay. Number 354. Do I really have a lot to say about a guy that's been played 10 billion times on the radio? I don't think I can say a lot. Very, 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 very commercial. Started out struggling. Got the Piano Man out. Became huge. This was 1978, so a lot of hits were on this. I can tell you that. Was Just the Way You Are in there? Doesn't make a difference. The guy sold a jillion records. Sold so many records that 10 years after this album came out, in 1988, was the We Didn't Start the Fire album, whatever that was called. And guess what? 30 years have gone by. Billy Joel has not come out with an album. And you know what? Thank you, Billy, because as talented as you are, you're so commercial, your music is so mainstream that the world doesn't need more Billy Joel records. And that is absolutely not a put down of his talent, songwriting. It's just to say, like April Wine said, enough is enough. You can still tour till you're in your wheelchair and dying or dead or whatever. People will come to see you. I saw you. You were great. You're still great. You could go to take your limousine from where you live in the Hamptons to New York and do your shows. Or I don't know if you're still doing that, but I think you sold out like hundreds of New York City Madison Square Garden shows. And then your buddy, maybe not your buddy, but the other guy from Springsteen does that too. Runs in, charges $600 a ticket or $500 or whatever it is for his shows. So you don't have to do anything. You're smart enough to know, Billy. You don't need to come up with records. You don't need to sit there in the studio. You're probably not. Actually, he might sell millions of records because he hasn't come up with anything for 30 years. So he might actually have a huge album because the people are saying, what the fuck happened to Billy Joel? He hasn't had a record in 30 years. Or probably nobody really cares because he just has to show up and sell out an arena because of all the hits. His hits period was probably 73 to 88. So that's 15 years. He had a 15-year run of knocking out massive #1 hits all over the place, all over the world. He did more than most acts do in 50 years, okay? He sold probably 150 million records around the world, at least 75, 80 million in the US. There's guys out there since the 60s, 70s that can't get even 10 million sold. And this guy did it in 15 years. I know Billy Joel did recordings in the late 60s too with bands that he was in that bombed and solo records that bombed. But I'm calling it 73 because he didn't have a hit until Piano Man. All right. I'm in a ranting mood. Must be all the Eddie Trunk shows I'm listening to. Also, the John Taffer shows, Bar Rescue. I'm watching those a lot lately, and this guy screams and yells constantly. That's how he makes a living. Goes in the room, screams at people. Number 353. Should I harbor a guess? Should we go way back? How unbelievable would it be if I was right? Jerry Lee Lewis. Let's see. Kanye West. Fucking asshole. I don't care about this guy, okay? He's actually quite talented. Number 353. He's got a few rap songs that when you listen to the words, they're actually quite intelligent. He's actually talented. But the guy's Do I put him down for acting mentally ill lately? For saying crazy stuff? Or maybe he's just a diehard Trump fan, loves the guy to death, and he's entitled to love the guy. There's nothing illegal about it. People love the guy. They voted him in. Maybe they'll vote him in again. But this guy was gung-ho on Donald Trump, let me tell you. Marries a Kardashian. I'm not too impressed with that. There's 2 or 3 things that show her talent. One's her ass and the other is her tits. So if you think that's talent in Kim Kardashian, then fine, go ahead and marry her. I don't give a damn. Hip-hop, blah, blah, blah. Kanye West, big deal. All right. I think people like you. People go to your shows. I think you're special, you're brilliant, you're a genius, or overlooked. Your ego's bigger than anybody else, and your talent is there, but I'm not going to say a lot about you because I don't really care. Number 352. Let's see, can I guess? Let's go back to the Kinks. Why not? Dire Straits. Oh, right country. Brothers in Arms. Massive selling. Money for Nothing was on there. Politically correct situations on radio stations have taken out the word faggot, because look at the faggot with the zeering or whatever, they say that in the song. And of course, that's not allowed anymore. So there's a lot of bleeping on the records. You don't hear the that word used in the current version that much. Maybe you might. Different radio stations have different policies. But other than that, I know that he does. Mark Knopfler, I think he didn't show up when he was inducted. Was he inducted last year to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? No, I don't think he showed up, or the other brother, because there's 2 Knopfler brothers. But the other members of the band showed up. So Mark, maybe, I don't know him personally. There's not much known about this guy. He is a great guitarist. I've seen a lot of videos of how he learns his craft and plays, and songwriter of very deep music, and has toured as Mark Knopfler without Dire Straits. And of course he's toured, I don't know when the last time they did tour together, but they're critically definitely acclaimed, and they did extremely well. I think I remember hearing that about 15 or 20 years ago, it was the biggest selling CD of all time in the 90s. This Brothers in Arms album in the late probably in the mid to late 90s. So maybe that was just in England, maybe it was worldwide, I don't know, probably just in England. Number 351, as we come to the very end of the Eddie G's music world. Number 351, so let's do one more guess. I'm not going to guess the Kinks. I just said it twice. Beach Boys. Let's say the Beach Boys. Neil Young and Crazy Horse. Rust Never Sleeps, number 351. This is the live Rust album. My Hey Hey was the big thing. It's a story about Johnny Rotten. And Neil Young's been one of these guys, mystical type of guy, he's brilliant, part of Crosby, Nash and Young. At some point early on, he left them and, was taken in by the grunge movement in the late 90s. They seemed to make him as old man poster boy for that movement. Great live. I did see him live and enjoy his songs, and I'm glad he's still around, and this album was showcasing his live music. Eddie G's Music World off and running for another week. It was fun. Fun to do it myself, fun to do it with people, fun to do it. We'll be back next week. They might take a couple of weeks off after that, because my kids will be out of school, and you try doing a show with 2 7-year-olds screaming at you. Actually might make it more interesting. So thank you very much for listening to those who do. Eddie G's Music World off for another day for December 11th, 2018. And I will look for the button that ends the show and press it. And we'll see you soon.